The night before Christmas, my father called me and said, "We think it's best if you stop being part of our lives. I'll move forward on my own." I didn't scream. I didn't beg for his love. I just replied, "If that's your decision, I'll respect it." I packed my bags and walked out into the freezing Chicago wind. But what he didn't realize was that by cutting me off, he was severing the only lifeline keeping his fragile empire from collapsing. When the dust finally settled, the illusion of his wealth would be shattered, and the family would be left begging for the very son they threw away like trash. Before I tell you exactly how their house of cards came crashing down, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It was December 24th, and the sky over Chicago was a heavy, bruised gray. I was 34 years old, working as a senior documentation risk analyst for one of the largest regional lenders in the Midwest. My entire career was built on finding the hidden cracks in financial foundations, spotting the lies people bury in paperwork before those lies cost someone millions. I was good at my job. In fact, I recently got a major promotion because I never let emotion cloud the numbers. But that professional detachment was about to be tested in a way I never saw coming. I was standing in the kitchen of my parents' sprawling, heavily mortgaged suburban home. The smell of roasted cinnamon and pine needles filled the air, a picture-perfect American Christmas. My mother, Sarah, was humming some holiday tune while arranging expensive crystal glasses on the dining table. Everything looked pristine, flawless, just the way my father, Robert, demanded it to be. Then the phone rang. It was my father. He had been out running errands, which usually meant avoiding the actual work of setting up for the holidays. I answered, expecting him to ask me to pick up a last-minute bottle of expensive bourbon. Instead, his voice came through the speaker, chillingly calm, completely stripped of any familial warmth. "Mason," he said, the word dropping like a lead weight. "I've been thinking about our conversation from yesterday, about your attitude regarding the Michigan house. And your mother and we've come to a decision." I leaned against the granite counter. "A decision about what, Dad?" "We think it's best if you stop being part of our lives. You're too negative. You don't support this family the way a son should. You're always looking for a problem, always trying to tear down what I'm building. I'm tired of the disrespect. I'll move forward on my own from here on out. Don't bother staying for dinner." He didn't say it in a fit of rage. He didn't yell. He delivered the words with the cold, calculated precision of a businessman terminating a defective employee. He honestly believed he was punishing me. He thought that by cutting me out, I would fall to my knees, beg for his forgiveness, and blindly sign whatever fraudulent documents he shoved in my face. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the luxury refrigerator next to me. A younger version of me might have felt a crushing blow to the chest. A younger version of me might have cried, asked what I did wrong, or tried to fix it. But I wasn't that kid anymore. My jaw tightened, and I looked out the window at the snow piling up on the driveway. "If that's your decision," I said, my voice as steady and cold as the weather outside, "I'll respect it." I hung up. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't go into the dining room to confront my mother, who likely knew exactly what he was doing and chose to look the other way, as she always did. I walked upstairs to the guest room, packed the small duffel bag I had brought for the weekend, threw on my heavy wool coat, and walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I just closed it firmly behind me. The drive back to my apartment in the city was completely silent. I didn't turn on the radio. I just gripped the steering wheel and watched the brake lights of the cars ahead of me blur in the falling snow. Families were rushing home to be together, and I had just been excommunicated from mine. But strangely, I didn't feel broken. I felt light. The massive, suffocating weight of being the family's secret cleanup crew was suddenly lifted from my shoulders. I went to sleep that night in my quiet, empty apartment. I slept better than I had in years. When I woke up on Christmas morning, the world outside was covered in a thick blanket of white. I made a strong pot of black coffee, sat down at my kitchen island, and opened my laptop. If my father wanted me out of his life, I was going to give him exactly what he asked for. Every single piece of it. I spent the next 3 hours untangling myself from his messy web. I pulled my name from every shared access point. But most importantly, I drafted formal, legally binding emails to the lenders, brokers, and real estate agents handling his precious Michigan Lake house purchase. I stated, in clear, undeniable corporate terms, that I was officially withdrawing my professional and personal backing from the file. I was no longer serving as a guarantor, an advisor, or a reference. I hit send. I documented the timestamps. I saved the PDFs to a secure hard drive. Then, I turned my phone off, poured myself another cup of coffee, and enjoyed my Christmas. It wasn't until late Christmas night that I finally powered my phone back on. The screen instantly lit up like a slot machine paying out a jackpot. Notifications flooded in, vibrating the phone across the countertop. 36 missed calls. 10 from my father. 15 from my older brother, Elijah. 5 from my mother. And 6 from numbers I didn't have saved but recognized by the area code. I scrolled past the missed calls and opened my text messages. There was a wall of frantic texts from Elijah, shifting from angry demands to panicked begging. But the one that caught my eye, the one that made a slow, cynical smile spread across my face, was from Joseph, my father's high-priced corporate lawyer. The text read, "Mason, call me immediately. We're facing a serious legal and financial problem." I set the phone down. The silence in my apartment felt like a victory lap. They were about to find out that the sun they threw away was the only thing holding their ceiling up. To understand why my phone was melting down on Christmas night, you have to understand the sick dynamics of the Caldwell family. We weren't just a family, we were a performance. And everyone had a specific role to play. Elijah was the golden boy. He was 3 years older than me, possessed my father's charming smile, and had a talent for looking incredibly busy while accomplishing absolutely nothing. He was the heir apparent to my father's logistics company, despite the fact that he couldn't read a balance sheet to save his life. To my parents, Elijah was an investment in their image. I, on the other hand, was the utility player, the cleanup crew, the safety net. I learned my place early on. I remember a humid summer night when I was 19. I had been working 2 jobs, landscaping in the morning, waiting tables at night, saving every dime for my college fund. I wanted to graduate without debt. I had over $12,000 saved in a joint account that my mother technically still had access to from when I was a minor. One night, Elijah came home at 3 a.m. He had taken my father's luxury sedan out without permission, had too much to drink, and wrapped it around a steel light pole. By some miracle, he walked away without a scratch. But the car was totaled, and if the police or insurance got involved, Elijah would be facing a DUI and potential jail time. My father handled it quietly. He paid off the property owner for the light pole, arranged for a private tow truck, and essentially buried the incident. But burying things costs cash. Fast, untraceable cash. A week later, I went to the ATM to deposit my paycheck. I checked my balance. It was 0. I ran home, my heart hammering in my chest, thinking I had been robbed. When I burst through the front door and demanded to know what happened, my mother pulled me into the kitchen. She had tears in her eyes, her favorite weapon. "Mason, honey, please understand," she whispered, gripping my forearms. "Your brother made a mistake. Terrible mistake. But if this gets out, his life is ruined. Your father needed liquid cash to make it go away. We had to use your college fund." I stared at her, the blood rushing to my ears. My college fund? That was my money. I worked 60 hours a week for that. "We're a family," she cried, her voice trembling with that practiced fragility. "Family protects family. You're smart, Mason. You'll figure it out. Elijah needs us right now. You have to be the bigger person." They never paid me back. Not a single cent. I took out student loans, worked night shifts through 4 years of university, and built my career from the ground up entirely on my own. But that moment defined our relationship. To them, my resources, my energy, and my future were just spare parts to be harvested whenever Elijah or my father crashed their lives. Despite everything, I stayed connected. I thought that if I became successful enough, independent enough, my father would finally look at me with the same pride he reserved for Elijah. I was wrong. By the time I was 30, I was making a very comfortable salary as a risk analyst. I drove a reliable car, owned a nice apartment, and had zero debt. I was stable. But in my father's world, stability was boring. He thrived on leverage, on flashing wealth he didn't actually own. He loved hosting elaborate dinner parties for his business associates. He would sit at the head of a massive mahogany table, pouring expensive wine, boasting about his latest ventures. And inevitably, he would turn his sights on me. "Look at Mason here," he'd say to a table full of laughing guests, swirling his wine glass. "Sits in a cubicle all day looking at spreadsheets. A risk analyst. You know what that means? It means they pay him a salary to be terrified of everything. The kid doesn't know how to take a leap. No entrepreneurial spirit. He's a pencil pusher." The table would chuckle. Elijah would smirk from across the table, wearing a custom-tailored suit paid for by the company credit card. I would just force a polite smile, cut my steak, and stay silent. But the hypocrisy was nauseating, because the very next morning, my father would call me, his arrogant tone completely gone, replaced by a low, urgent whisper. "Mason, I need you to look at a commercial lease agreement. The terms look a little tight." Or, "Mason, Elijah messed up the quarterly tax filings again. The IRS sent a notice. Can you come to the office and untangle this before the accountant sees it?" I was the target of his jokes in public, but I was his desperate savior in private. I reviewed his contracts. I restructured his debt. I quietly fixed Elijah's massive accounting errors. I did it because, deep down, the indoctrination of family protects family was hard to shake. I thought I was protecting them. I didn't realize I was just enabling a monster. The breaking point began forming in late October, about 2 months before the Christmas Eve fallout. My father decided he needed a lake house in Michigan. Not a cabin. A sprawling, multi-million-dollar estate on the water with a private dock. He didn't want it for family vacations. He wanted it as a monument to his ego. He wanted to invite his business rivals up there, serve them scotch, and casually prove that he was out-earning them. The problem was, his business wasn't earning. It was bleeding. He sent me the preliminary mortgage file to glance over. When I opened the PDFs, I almost choked on my coffee. The file was a disaster. His debt-to-income ratio was dangerously high. The company's cash reserves were practically non-existent. He was hiding 2 massive balloon loans under obscure LLCs, hoping the underwriter wouldn't dig deep enough to connect them to him. He was trying to secure a massive new mortgage based entirely on projected future earnings and a heavily inflated appraisal of his current assets. I drove out to the suburbs to confront him. I found him in his home office, practicing his golf swing on the expensive Persian rug. "Dad, you can't submit this file," I told him, dropping the printed stack of papers on his desk. "The underwriter will flag this in 3 seconds. You don't have the liquidity to close on a house this size, let alone maintain it. And these hidden commercial loans? If the bank finds out you intentionally omitted them, that's mortgage fraud." He didn't even stop his swing. Thwack. He hit an invisible golf ball. "You worry too much, Mason. That's your problem. You see a roadblock. I see a detour. The broker is a friend of mine. He's going to push it through." "The broker doesn't fund the loan," I argued, my frustration rising. "The bank does, and the bank will audit this." He finally stopped and glared at me. "Then fix it. That's what you do, isn't it? Put your name on the guarantor line as a secondary. Write a letter of explanation from a professional risk standpoint, saying the commercial debts are isolated and fully serviced by the LLCs. Use your fancy title to make them comfortable." He wanted me to put my own unblemished credit and my professional reputation on the line to act as a human shield for his bad debt. I refused. "I'm not committing fraud for you. I will help you organize the file. I will help you draft honest explanations, but I will not lie to a lender, and I will not attach my name to an asset you can't afford." He sneered at me. Fine. Just organize the damn paperwork so it looks clean. I'll handle the rest. So I compromised. I helped him format the application. I drafted letters explaining the legitimate income streams. Because of my involvement in setting up the file, my name and contact information were listed as the primary documentation contact. The bank's underwriters knew my credentials. They trusted files that came across my desk because I was known in the industry for being ruthlessly thorough. My father knew that. He was wearing my reputation like a cheap suit to sneak past the guards. By December, the cracks were showing. The lender assigned to the file was a guy named Carter. Carter was sharp, aggressive, and didn't care about my father's country club memberships. He wanted hard proof of funds. Carter started sending emails demanding updated bank statements, specifically looking for the liquid cash needed for the massive down payment and the required 6 months of cash reserves. My father started dodging the emails. He told me to stall them. Tell them the funds are tied up in a short-term certificate. Tell them we're waiting on a vendor payout. I can't tell them that if it's not true, I replied over the phone. Carter is asking for the source of the down payment. Dad, where's the money? It's coming, he snapped. Stop interrogating me. You work for me, understand? I don't work for you, I shot back. I'm your son, trying to keep you out of federal court. The tension boiled over on December 23rd. Carter sent a hard deadline. Provide the proof of funds by December 26th, or the loan application would be formally denied, and my father would lose his non-refundable earnest money deposit, which was a staggering amount. I called my father. He was defensive, cornered, and furious. Dad, you have to tell Carter the truth. If you don't have the cash, back out of the deal. Take the loss on the deposit. If you try to forge a bank statement or move money from the company payroll account, they will catch you. You arrogant little punk, he hissed into the phone, his voice dripping with venom. You think because you wear a suit to an office building you know how the world works? You're nothing. You've always been nothing but a wet blanket on this family. You're jealous. You're jealous that Elijah is taking over the business, and I'm buying a mansion while you sit in your little condo worrying about rules. I'm trying to protect you, I yelled back. I don't need your protection. I need you to do what you're told. You know what? Don't even bother coming tomorrow. We don't need your negative energy around the tree. He hung up on me. That led directly to the calm, calculated call the next day, Christmas Eve, where he officially told me to stop being part of their lives. He thought his power play would break me. He thought the threat of losing my family would force me to crawl back, hack into the documents, and magically produce a clean financial profile for him. He severely miscalculated. He forgot that the wet blanket was the only thing keeping his house from catching fire. Let's go back to Christmas morning. After drinking my coffee, I sat at my computer. The glow of the screen illuminated the dark kitchen. If my father wanted to operate without me, he was going to do it completely bare. I opened my email client. I drafted a message to Carter, the aggressive underwriter at the bank. I carbon copied Wyatt, the real estate broker, and Joseph, my father's attorney. The subject line was simple, urgent. Immediate withdrawal of representation, Robert Caldwell file. The body of the email was surgically precise. To all parties involved, please be advised that effective immediately, December 25th, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, I, Mason Caldwell, am officially withdrawing from any and all involvement regarding the mortgage application and property purchase for Robert Caldwell. I am not a guarantor. I am not a financial advisor for this transaction. I have not verified, nor do I endorse, any financial documents, reserve statements, or proof of funds submitted after December 1st. Any future communication regarding this file should be directed solely to Robert Caldwell or his legal counsel. Please remove my name, email, and phone number from this file immediately. Regards, Mason Caldwell. I didn't stop there. I logged into the shared cloud drive where my father kept the company's financial documents, the drive I organized and managed for free. I revoked my own admin access. I locked myself out. I severed every digital, legal, and professional tie I had to his name. I watched the timestamp tick over. 8:05 a.m. It was done. It felt like removing a tumor I had carried around for 15 years. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and actually smiled. For the first time in my life, whatever disaster happened next was entirely not my problem. In the banking world, an email like that from the primary documentation contact is like throwing a smoke grenade into a crowded room. It signals to underwriters that something is catastrophically wrong with the file. Screams, "Run away from this deal." Because it was Christmas Day, I knew Carter and Wyatt wouldn't see it immediately. But they were high-level finance guys. Their work emails were synced to their phones. By 3 p.m., the reaction started. I had my phone on silent, face down on the counter. But when I finally picked it up that evening, I saw the fallout. Elijah had left 3 voicemails. I pressed play on the first one. "Hey, Mason. Merry Christmas, bro. Listen, Dad is furious. Mom is crying in the kitchen. Just come over, okay? Apologize. He'll forgive you. You know how he gets. Don't be a jerk and ruin the holiday." He still thought this was a petty family argument. He didn't know about the email yet. The second voicemail, left 2 hours later, had a very different tone. "Mason, pick up the phone. What the hell did you send to Wyatt? Wyatt just called Dad during dinner panicking. You told the bank you're out? Are you insane? You're going to blow the whole deal. Call me right now." The third voicemail, left around 8 p.m., was pure, unadulterated panic. "Mason, please man, pick up. Dad is having chest pains. Wyatt said the bank's automated system just flagged the file for a hard manual review because of your email. They're freezing the process. We need that house, Mason. If this deal falls through, there's stuff you don't know about. Please just call us. Fix this." I deleted all 3 voicemails. The satisfaction was a warm hum in my chest. They wanted to cast me out into the cold, but they expected me to leave my coat behind for them. Not anymore. The next morning, December 26th, at exactly 9 a.m., I returned the text message from Joseph, the corporate lawyer. Joseph was a guy who usually spoke in polished, measured tones. He billed $600 an hour to sound unbothered by anything. But when he answered my call on the second ring, he sounded like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. "Mason, thank God. I've been trying to reach you since last night. Merry Christmas, Joseph. I assume this isn't a social call." "Mason, listen to me," Joseph said, lowering his voice as if someone might overhear him. "Your father is in a very precarious position. Your email to Carter triggered a fraud alert algorithm at the bank. They've halted the underwriting process, and they are demanding a full, forensic audit of the down payment funds by noon today." "That sounds like a problem for my father and his attorney," I replied calmly. "Not me. Mason, don't play games. You know he doesn't have the cash. He was relying on a bridge loan that fell through, and he was using your professional credibility to keep Carter from digging too deep while he scrambled. You pulling out like that, it didn't just kill the house deal. It exposed the company. He told me he didn't want me in his life anymore, Joseph. I simply followed his instructions to the letter." Joseph sighed heavily. "Look, your dad's pride got the better of him. He's willing to apologize. We just need a favor. A small one. Send Carter a follow-up email. Tell him your previous message was sent in error due to a family dispute. Tell him you are reviewing the proof of funds today and will personally vouch for the reserves. It buys us 48 hours to move some money around." I gripped the phone tighter. My father didn't even have the spine to beg me himself. He sent his lawyer to ask me to commit wire fraud. "Joseph," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "if you ever ask me to falsify a document or lie to a federal lender again, I will report your license to the Bar Association before I hang up this phone. My withdrawal stands. Do not contact me to fix his mess again." There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Joseph knew he had crossed a line, and he knew I wasn't bluffing. "Mason, you don't understand how bad this is," Joseph finally said, his professional facade completely crumbling. "If they audit the company accounts to verify his income, it's not just the house he loses. He loses the business." I frowned. The business isn't doing great, but the commercial lines of credit are stable enough to survive a denied mortgage. Why would he lose the business? Because of the overdrafts, Joseph muttered, sounding defeated. What overdrafts? Your brother, Joseph said, the words hitting me like a physical blow. Elijah, you know that trust fund your father always bragged about setting up for him? The one paying for Elijah's lifestyle. Yeah, the trust fund that apparently I wasn't good enough to get. Joseph let out a bitter laugh. There is no trust fund, Mason. There never was. Elijah has been living off a corporate overdraft facility. The Porsche he leases? The vacations? The custom suits? He's been draining the company's operating capital for 3 years. Your father hid it by categorizing them as executive consulting fees. If the bank audits those accounts, they'll see that the company is technically insolvent. And Carter is demanding those exact bank statements by noon. Coup twist foo one. The revelation hit me so hard I had to sit down. My stomach churned with a mixture of disgust and absolute fury. All those years. All those dinners where Elijah mocked my salary, where my father called me a pencil pusher. Elijah wasn't a successful heir. He was a parasite bleeding his own father dry. And my father, in his desperate need to maintain the image of the golden boy, was willing to commit corporate fraud to cover it up. And they wanted me to risk federal prison to keep the charade going. My jaw clamped shut. A vein throbbed in my temple. Joseph, I said softly, the anger hardening into something cold and unbreakable. Tell my father he has until noon to produce the documents. I suggest he starts looking for a bankruptcy lawyer. Mason, please, he's your family? No. He made it very clear on Christmas Eve that I am not part of his family. Good luck, Joseph. I hung up. I blocked Joseph's number. I blocked my father. I blocked Elijah. I blocked my mother. If they were going to drown, I wasn't going to let them use me as a raft. 3 days passed. The silence from my phone was deafening, but it was a peaceful kind of silence. I went to work, hit the gym, and drank my coffee in peace. But I knew people like my father didn't just give up. When brute force fails, they turn to manipulation. On Thursday evening, I got a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and sighed. It was Cameron. Cameron was a longtime family friend. A guy who owned a string of car dealerships and played golf with my dad every Sunday. He was the classic uncle figure. Always smiling, always offering unsolicited advice, and deeply embedded in my father's toxic circle of enablers. I opened the door. Cameron stood there in a cashmere overcoat, holding a bottle of Macallan 18. He put on his best sympathetic, sad puppy face. Mason, my boy, he said gently. Can I come in? Just for a minute. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Make it quick, Cameron. I have plans. He walked in, looking around my modest, clean apartment as if he were inspecting a charity case. He set the scotch on the counter. Look, Mason, I know things are heated right now. Your dad is a proud man. He says things he doesn't mean when he's stressed. But you're destroying him. He hasn't slept in days. The bank rejected the mortgage. They're demanding the company books. Sarah is a wreck. Cameron, I interrupted, leaning against the wall, my arms crossed. Did he send you here to guilt-trip me? I came because I care about this family, Cameron said, placing a hand over his heart. Mason, you have to help him. You're the smart one. You know finance. You can restructure this. You just need to step up. I stared at him. The sheer audacity of these people. Step up. I laughed dryly. He asked me to lie to a bank. He's covering for Elijah's theft. And he told me he'd be better off without me. Which part of that implies I should step up? Cameron looked away, shifting uncomfortably on his expensive leather shoes. Coup twist foo 3 was about to drop. Mason, you have to understand why he's so desperate, Cameron mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. He didn't just need your name as a reference. He was relying on your income. I froze. What does that mean? Cameron swallowed hard. Before you sent that email, He told Wyatt to draft a secondary addendum. He was going to use your W-2s and your condo equity to cross-collateralize the loan. He thought if he got the paperwork far enough along, he could just slide it in front of you to sign, and you'd do it because you always fix things. The air in the room vanished. My heart pounded a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. He wasn't just using my reputation. He was actively planning to secretly hijack my personal assets. The condo I bought with my own sweat and blood, the salary I earned while he mocked me, to pay for his fake mansion. He was going to chain me to a sinking ship without my consent. I walked over to the front door and pulled it wide open. The cold hallway air rushed in. "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with a rage I had never felt before. "Mason, be reasonable." I said, "Get out, Cameron," I roared, the sound echoing down the hallway. "And if you or my father ever come near my property or my finances again, I will have you both arrested for attempted fraud. Get the hell out of my house." Cameron scrambled out the door, leaving the bottle of scotch behind. I slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there, my chest heaving, my hands curled into fists. Any lingering shred of guilt I had about abandoning my family evaporated in that exact moment. They were dead to me. The next morning, I was sitting at my desk at the corporate office, reviewing a legitimate commercial file, trying to bury my anger in work. My desk phone rang. It was Matthew, a senior underwriter at my firm and one of the few people I considered a genuine, loyal friend in this cutthroat industry. Matthew knew the banking circle in Chicago better than anyone. "Mason," Matthew said, his voice low, "are you sitting down?" "I am. What's wrong?" "I'm at the Oak Brook Country Club. The Regional Chamber of Commerce is having their annual post-holiday networking luncheon." "Okay. And your father is here," Matthew said. I frowned. "So? He likes to schmooze." "Mason, he's holding court by the ice sculpture. He's talking to David, the regional VP of First National, the bank that holds the notes on your dad's business. And he's talking to Luke, the biggest supply chain vendor in the state." My stomach tightened. "What is he saying?" "He's bragging about the Michigan Lake house," Matthew said, his tone dripping with disbelief. "He's telling everyone that the deal is closing next week. And worse, he's dropping your name. I just heard him tell David that my son Mason, the risk analyst, ran the numbers and says it's the best investment we've ever made. Mason is handling all the complex paperwork. He is using you as his shield, right now in public." My blood turned to ice. Even after the deal was dead. Even after the bank had flagged him for fraud. Even after he tried to steal my assets. He was standing in a room full of millionaires, wearing my hard-earned reputation like a mask to hide his rotting empire. He was desperately trying to secure his business loans and vendor trust by pretending I was still backing him. He thought because I was quiet I was weak. He thought I would stay hiding in my apartment while he paraded my name around town. "Matthew," I said, my voice eerily calm, "is David still standing with him?" "Yeah. Looks like they're heading to the VIP table for lunch in about 20 minutes. "Stall them," I said, standing up and grabbing my suit jacket from the back of my chair. "I'm 10 minutes away." "Mason, what are you going to do?" Matthew asked, a hint of nervous excitement in his voice. "I'm going to take my name back," I replied. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt surgical. I adjusted my tie, grabbed a manila folder containing the printed, time-stamped emails I had sent on Christmas morning, and walked to the elevator. I wasn't going there to scream. I wasn't going there to throw a punch. I was going there to detonate a bomb in the exact center of his fake universe. The drive from my downtown corporate office to the Oak Brook Country Club took exactly 22 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call Matthew back to ask for updates. I just drove in complete silence, listening to the steady hum of my car engine and the rhythmic thud of my own heartbeat. I was perfectly calm. It was a strange, terrifying kind of calm. It's the kind of absolute clarity that settles over you when you finally realize you have absolutely nothing left to lose, and no one left to protect. I pulled my car up to the grand entrance of the country club. The valet, a young kid in a sharp red vest, hurried over to open my door. I handed him the keys, stepped out into the freezing winter air, and adjusted the cuffs of my navy suit. I reached into the passenger seat and grabbed the thick manila folder I had brought with me. Inside that folder were the printed, time-stamped copies of every single email and official withdrawal notice I had sent on Christmas morning. It was my armor. It was my ammunition. I took a deep breath, feeling the icy air fill my lungs, and walked toward the heavy oak double doors. I stepped into the main ballroom, and the warmth of the room hit me instantly. The air was heavy with the scent of expensive catered food, fresh pine needles from the massive holiday displays, and the subtle mix of designer colognes and perfumes. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft, golden light over dozens of round tables covered in pristine white linen. The room was packed with the wealthiest business owners, brokers, and bankers in the region. These were the people my father worshipped. This room, this entire atmosphere of manufactured wealth and status, was his absolute sanctuary. I stood near the entrance for a moment, letting my eyes scan the crowded room. It didn't take long to find him. My father was standing near a massive ice sculpture carved into the shape of a swan, right in the center of the VIP networking area. He looked entirely in his element. He was holding a glass of sparkling water with a lime wedge, wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than some people's monthly salary. He was laughing, that big, booming, incredibly fake laugh he used when he wanted people to think he owned the room and everyone in it. My mother, Sarah, stood right beside him. She was smiling tightly, nodding at whatever he was saying, playing the role of the supportive, wealthy wife to perfection. Elijah was there too, looking bored and arrogant, constantly checking his phone while casually sipping a craft cocktail. He was wearing a designer watch paid for by the very company he was secretly bankrupting. And standing directly across from my father, listening to his every word, were David, the regional vice president of First National Bank, and Luke, the owner of the largest commercial supply chain company in the state. These two men were the pillars holding up my father's failing business. First National held the notes on his commercial credit lines, and Luke controlled his vendor supply. If either of them pulled out, my father's company would collapse overnight. I gripped the manila folder tighter in my right hand. I started walking. I didn't rush. I didn't storm across the room like a madman. I moved through the crowd with measured, deliberate steps. A few people I recognized from past industry events nodded at me, but I didn't stop to make small talk. I kept my eyes completely locked on my father. As I got within earshot, the sound of his voice became crystal clear over the ambient noise of the ballroom. He was doing exactly what Matthew had warned me about. He was selling a ghost story. The Michigan property is a crown jewel, my father boasted, gesturing broadly with his free hand to emphasize his point. We close next week, right before the new year. It's a massive step forward for the family portfolio, a real legacy asset. And I have to say, having my son Mason handle the risk assessment and compliance gave the underwriters complete peace of mind. He's the best in the business. He practically bulletproofed the entire file for us. David nodded approvingly, taking a sip of his drink. Mason is sharp, Robert. We always appreciate a file that comes across his desk at the firm. He runs a very tight ship. It gives us a lot of confidence knowing he's managing the documentation. I stopped right behind David, standing just inches from the group. I appreciate the compliment, David, I said. The entire group froze. It was as if someone had hit the pause button on the universe. David turned around, looking pleasantly surprised to see me. Luke offered a polite, professional smile. But my family's reaction was entirely different. It was a masterclass in sheer panic. My mother went completely pale. All the color drained from her face in an instant, and her hand flew up to her chest as if she had just seen a ghost. Elijah dropped his phone into his suit pocket, his posture instantly shifting from relaxed arrogance to rigid defense. He looked like a cornered animal. My father's face was the most telling of all. For a fraction of a second, his eyes widened in absolute horror. His jaw tightened, and the smug confidence vanished. But he had spent a lifetime practicing how to lie to survive, so he quickly forced a massive, incredibly strained smile onto his face. "Mason!" my father loudly announced, stepping forward to block my path to David. He clapped a heavy hand onto my shoulder. His grip was painfully tight, his fingers digging into my collarbone. It was a silent, desperate warning to shut my mouth. What a surprise. I didn't think you could make it away from the corporate office today. You said you were buried in paperwork. I looked down at his hand gripping my shoulder, then slowly raised my eyes to meet his. I didn't smile back. My expression was completely blank. "I made time," I said, my voice carrying clearly, cutting right through the background chatter of the room. "Especially after Matthew called and told me you were here discussing the Michigan property with First National." My father's grip tightened even further, to the point of hurting. He let out a nervous chuckle. "Right, well, we were just catching up on some broad strokes. Why don't you and I go grab a drink at the bar? Give these gentlemen some space to talk shop." He tried to physically steer me away from the group, pushing his weight against me. I planted my feet firmly on the carpet. I didn't budge a single inch. "I don't think that's necessary," I said smoothly, easily brushing his hand off my shoulder. I turned my attention entirely to the bank executive. "David, I heard my father mentioning my involvement in the Michigan Lake House file just now." David looked between me and my father, a slight frown forming on his forehead. He was an experienced banker. He could instantly sense the sudden drop in temperature and the extreme tension radiating from my family. "Yes, Mason. He was just saying how instrumental you've been in finalizing the documentation for the underwriting team. It's a solid package." I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch for a couple of seconds. "That's very interesting, David, because I actually came here today to ask my father a direct question about that exact package." I shifted my gaze back to Robert. He was sweating now. Tiny beads of moisture were forming on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning of the ballroom. "Dad," I asked, my tone deadly serious, "did you update David, or the underwriter Carter, that I formally withdrew my representation from that file? Or did you just forget to mention it?" The silence that followed was absolute. It felt like all the oxygen had been violently sucked out of the room. A few people standing at the adjacent tables stopped talking mid-sentence and turned their heads toward us, sensing the conflict. My mother stepped forward quickly, her voice high-pitched and trembling with forced sweetness. "Mason, honey, please. This is a holiday event. We are all here to celebrate. We don't need to discuss private family business here in front of everyone." "This isn't family business, Mom," I replied, never taking my eyes off my father. "This is banking business, and it's my professional license on the line." Elijah scoffed loudly, stepping up next to my father, trying to play the tough older brother routine that usually worked when we were kids. "Are you crazy? What is wrong with you? Stop embarrassing the family, Mason. Step outside right now before you make a fool of yourself." "I'll step outside when I get a clear answer," I said, my voice hardening into solid steel. I looked right through Elijah and back at Robert. "Dad, did you tell the lender that I am no longer involved? Or are you still spending my credibility?" My father's face flushed a deep, angry red. The veins in his neck bulged. He realized he couldn't charm his way out of this, so he resorted to anger. He leaned in and lowered his voice to a vicious, venomous whisper meant only for me. "You ungrateful little punk. You are making a massive mistake. You walk away right now, or you are dead to me." He then stood up straight, turned back to David and Luke, and forced another strained laugh. "I apologize, gentlemen. Truly. My son is going through some very difficult personal issues right now. He's a bit emotional today. It's just a misunderstanding at home that he's bringing into the professional space. Let's just ignore this." David didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. David was a senior banking executive who survived in a cutthroat industry by smelling financial risk from a mile away. He looked at my father with cold, calculating eyes, then looked at me, Robert, I'm a bit confused, David said, his tone entirely stripped of its previous warmth. It was now strictly business. What exactly does Mason mean about withdrawing? You submitted the finalized secondary guarantor addendum to Carter's underwriting team just yesterday morning. It had Mason's signature right at the bottom, verifying the reserve accounts. The ground completely fell out from under me. For a second, the chandeliers above me seemed to blur. My heart stopped beating. My father didn't just hide my withdrawal. He didn't just casually drop my name in conversation. He actively forged my signature on a federal banking document. 24 hours after I told him I was done. 24 hours after I officially pulled out. He committed felony mortgage fraud and tried to lock my salary, my future condo equity, and my entire professional career into his sinking ship. I looked at my father. He looked like a trapped rat. The arrogant facade, the expensive suit, the booming laugh. It was all entirely gone. He knew I had him. He knew it was over. I opened the manila folder in my hands. I pulled out the printed emails. David, I said, my voice ringing with absolute, undeniable clarity. I withdrew all authorization, representation, and backing from Robert Caldwell's file on the morning of December 25th. At exactly 8:05 a.m., I sent formal notification to Carter, to the real estate broker Wyatt, and to my father's corporate lawyer, Joseph. Here is the time-stamped communication proving my withdrawal. I handed the paper directly to David. He took it, pulled his reading glasses from his breast pocket, and scanned the text. His eyes darted across the page, absorbing the undeniable proof. Whatever document my father handed your underwriter yesterday morning with my signature on it, I continued, making sure Luke and everyone else standing within 20 feet heard every single word, is a complete forgery. I have not signed anything. I am not backing his debt. I have not verified his corporate accounts. And I am entirely removing myself from any association with his company, effective immediately. David slowly lowered the paper. He took off his reading glasses. He didn't yell. He didn't cause a massive theatrical scene. He simply looked at my father as if he were looking at a corpse, a dead man walking. Robert, David said quietly, the finality in his voice echoing louder than a scream. Do not contact my office again regarding the Michigan property. That file is dead. Furthermore, our legal and compliance department will be in touch with you on Monday morning regarding a full forensic audit of your active corporate credit lines. Have your accountant ready. Luke, the massive supply chain vendor, took 2 very distinct steps backward, distancing himself physically from my father as if the man were suddenly contagious. I think we need to severely review our vendor terms and payment schedules on Monday, Robert. Net 30 is no longer going to work for us. Excuse me. Both men turned around and walked away into the crowd. They didn't look back. They didn't offer a handshake. They severed ties right then and there. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment, 1, below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The silence left in the wake of David and Luke's departure was deafening. My father stood completely frozen, his arms hanging uselessly at his sides. The color had vanished from his face, leaving him looking gray and sick. He looked incredibly small, like a balloon that had just been violently popped. My mother began to cry softly, her hands covering her mouth, realizing that the luxurious life she had always bragged about was evaporating before her eyes. Elijah looked like he was about to be physically sick right there on the carpet. The brutal realization of what had just happened was crashing down on him. Without David's bank, there was no company. Without the company, there was no money to fund his fake trust fund lifestyle. My father finally found his voice. It was a weak, pathetic, trembling rasp. Mason, how could you do this to me? To your own family, your own father? I looked at him. I searched myself for any trace of guilt, any trace of sadness or regret. But there was nothing. I felt absolutely nothing but a profound, overwhelming sense of closure. "You did this to yourself, Dad," I said, my voice perfectly level. "You stood in your kitchen on Christmas Eve and told me you'd be better off without me. You told me you wanted to move forward on your own. I'm just making sure everybody in this room knows you're finally flying solo." I closed my empty manila folder, turned my back on them, and walked away. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody yelled. The murmuring and whispering from the crowd started before I even reached the heavy double doors. I walked out into the crisp, freezing winter air, handed my ticket to the valet, tipped him a 20, got into my car, and drove away. For the next 2 days, my phone was entirely silent. No angry voicemails, no panic texts. The storm had finally broken, and the wreckage was slowly settling at the bottom of the ocean. On the evening of the third day, a text message came through. It wasn't from my father, and it wasn't from Elijah. It was from my mother. It wasn't manipulative. It wasn't angry. It was just an act of pure desperation. "Mason, please come to the house. Please, we just need to talk. One last time. We are begging you." Against my better judgment, I decided to go. Not because I wanted to fix anything, and certainly not because I wanted to forgive them. I went because I wanted to see the reality of what happens when the lies finally run out. I needed to see the end of the movie. I drove out to the suburbs and walked through the front door of my parents' house. It was the exact same house I had left on Christmas Eve, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The holiday decorations, the expensive tree, the crystal glasses. It all looked cheap and depressing now. The house felt freezing cold, as if they had turned the heating off to save money. I found them sitting in the main living room. My father was slouched deep in his oversized leather armchair. He looked like he had aged 15 years in 48 hours. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were bloodshot. He was wearing stained sweatpants and an old t-shirt, completely stripped of his tailored armor. Elijah was pacing frantically by the large bay window, chewing obsessively on his fingernails. When I walked into the room, they all looked at me. They didn't look at me like a son or a brother. They looked at me like a criminal defendant looks at a judge walking into a courtroom to deliver a maximum sentence. "Mason," my mother whispered, standing up shakily from the sofa. "Thank you for coming. Thank you." I didn't sit down. I stood near the entryway, keeping a physical distance between us. "Make it quick. I have places to be. Why am I here?" My father let out a long, shuddering breath. He wouldn't even lift his head to meet my eyes. He just stared blankly at the expensive Persian rug beneath his feet. "Carter officially denied the mortgage," my father said, his voice completely hollow, stripped of all its former arrogance. "The bank flagged the file for severe fraud. They reported the forgery to the banking network. Every major commercial lender in the state knows about it now. First National froze all my operating accounts this morning." "I know," I replied coldly. "David made his intentions pretty clear at the country club." Elijah stopped his frantic pacing and spun around to face me, his face twisted in panic and rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done to us? The bank audited the company books yesterday. They saw all the overdrafts. They're recalling the commercial credit lines entirely. Dad has to liquidate half the trucking fleet just to cover employee payroll next week. I'm going to lose my car. I'm going to lose my apartment." I looked at my older brother, the golden boy, the supposed heir to the empire, whining about a leased luxury car while his father's life work burned to the ground around him. "You lost your car the minute you started stealing from the company to pay for it, Elijah," I said sharply, shutting him down instantly. "Don't you dare try to pin your theft on me. You drained the corporate accounts to fund your vacations. You ruined the reserves. You bankrupted this family, not me." "We are a family," my mother cried out, the tears finally spilling over and ruining her makeup. "Why do you have to be so cruel, Mason? Your father made a mistake under immense pressure. The lawyer gave him bad advice. Wyatt the broker rushed him into signing things. He was just trying to provide a better life for us. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh that echoed in the quiet house. Provide for us? Mom, listen to yourself. Listen to the delusion. He wasn't providing for anyone. He was stealing my identity to fund his massive ego. You want to talk about family? Let's talk about family. Family doesn't forge a son's signature on a federal loan document. Family doesn't drain a kid's college fund to cover up a drunk driving accident and never pay it back. Family doesn't mock a man's honest salary and career at a dinner table, and then secretly beg him to commit felonies in the dark to save their skin. I looked directly at my father. He finally raised his heavy head. His eyes were red-rimmed, wet, and completely defeated. You never wanted a son, Dad. I told him, my voice steady, unwavering, and brutally honest. You wanted an insurance policy. You wanted a human shield. You spent my entire adult life treating me like a backup generator, keeping me hidden in the dark until you needed to drain my power to keep your fake lights on. And the very second I refused to let you steal my future and my condo equity, you threw me out into the snow. You thought I would come crawling back, begging for your approval. You were dead wrong. My father opened his mouth to speak. He raised a trembling hand, but nothing came out. There were no more lies left to tell. The script was empty. The performance was over. I'm done, I said, taking a step backward toward the door. I am officially, permanently done with all of you. Do not call my phone. Do not text me. If you ever try to use my name on a legal document again, I won't just expose you at a networking event. I will hire a lawyer and I will send you to federal prison. Goodbye. I turned around and walked out of the house. I heard my mother start sobbing loudly, a terrible, gut-wrenching sound, as I closed the front door behind me. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, got in, and drove back to the city. I never set foot in that house again. The months that followed were a masterclass in the domino effect. When a foundation is built entirely on rot, it doesn't take much for the whole structure to collapse. My father officially lost the Michigan house. He forfeited the massive earnest money deposit because the contract was breached due to fraudulent documentation. But losing the house was just the tip of the iceberg. David was true to his word. First National Bank aggressively audited my father's business. They sent forensic accountants who uncovered the massive, gaping holes Elijah had torn into the operating capital over the years. The bank immediately called in the commercial loans, demanding repayment in full. The vendors, led by Luke, demanded cash on delivery for all supplies, refusing to extend any more credit. To avoid complete bankruptcy and potential criminal charges for the forgery, my father was forced to sell 60% of his logistics company to a massive, ruthless corporate competitor. He sold it for absolute pennies on the dollar. He was immediately stripped of his CEO title and given a humiliating, powerless advisory role in the very company he built. His massive corner office was taken away, and he was moved to a small, windowless room down the hall. Elijah's fall from grace was spectacular and swift. Without the company credit cards to hide behind, his luxury lifestyle evaporated overnight. The bank repossessed his leased Porsche right out of his apartment parking garage. He couldn't afford the exorbitant rent on his downtown penthouse, so he was evicted and forced to move into a cheap, cramped one-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood. The arrogant trust fund kid suddenly had to start looking for an entry-level job at 37 years old, realizing he had absolutely zero actual skills on his resume. And then came the final, brutal twist of the knife. Wyatt, the slick real estate broker who had been so eager to push the shady deal through, completely turned on my father. To save his own real estate license and his reputation in the wealthy suburbs, Wyatt started a vicious whisper campaign at the country club. He told everyone that he was the one who caught the forged signature. He painted himself as the ethical hero who stopped Robert Caldwell from committing mortgage fraud. Wyatt threw my father completely under the bus to save his own skin. My father became a complete pariah. The men who used to drink his expensive scotch, play golf with him, and laugh at his jokes now literally crossed the street to avoid him. He lost his wealth, his status, his fake friends, and his pride. Meanwhile, my life moved in the exact opposite direction. Free from the constant, draining anchor of my family's financial chaos, my career skyrocketed. The promotion I earned earlier that year gave me the financial freedom I had always worked so hard for. 6 months after the country club incident, I walked into a title office and closed on a beautiful, spacious condo in downtown Chicago. I paid a massive down payment with money I earned honestly. There were no hidden loans, no forged signatures, no secret liabilities. The deed had only one name on it, Mason Caldwell. But I didn't cut off absolutely everyone. There was one person in my family who never used me, who never lied to me, and who always treated me with respect. My grandfather, John. My father's dad. Grandpa John had been living in a terrible, run-down assisted living facility for years because my father claimed the family couldn't afford anything better. The truth was, my father was just too cheap to spend money on anything that didn't directly benefit his public image. I hired an aggressive eldercare lawyer. I fought for and won full medical custody and financial power of attorney over my grandfather, legally blocking my father from accessing John's modest pension ever again. I used my own savings and my new salary to move Grandpa John into a beautiful, luxury nursing home with a view of the lake, excellent food, and round-the-clock premium care. I visit him every single Sunday. We sit by the large windows, drink good coffee, and play chess for hours. He looks at me with genuine, uncompromised pride. He is the only family I need. Sitting in my new condo now, looking out over the Chicago skyline as the city lights up the night, I sometimes think about that Christmas Eve. I think about the absolute coldness in my father's voice when he told me to leave. People are conditioned from birth to believe that blood is thicker than water. Society constantly tells us that we have to forgive our parents, that we have to endure toxic behavior, financial abuse, and manipulation simply because they are family. But I learned the hard way that family is just a biological coincidence. True family is built on respect, honesty, and mutual care. If someone only loves you for what you can provide, whether it's money, a free legal shield, or a punching bag, they don't love you at all. They love the convenience of you. Setting a boundary doesn't make you cruel. It makes you healthy. It is the only way to stop the cycle of abuse. My father spent my entire life calling me a coward, a wet blanket, a pencil pusher. He thought my kindness was weakness. He thought my loyalty was blind obedience. On Christmas Eve, he told me he would be better off without me. He told me he wanted to move forward on his own. In the end, I didn't destroy him. I simply gave him the exact life he asked for. And it turns out, the price of living without me was a lot higher than he ever could have imagined. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a long one, but it feels incredibly freeing to finally get it all out and share it with people who might understand. I hope this resonated with you in some way, especially if you've ever felt like you were drowning while trying to keep someone else afloat. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member to save your own sanity and your own future? I really want to know your stories. If you made it all the way to the very end of this video, you are part of a very special group of people. I like to call it the 1% Club. Prove that you made it this far by dropping the letter W in the comments below. W stands for winner, because anyone who has the strength to set boundaries and walk away from abuse is a true winner in my book. Please don't forget to hit the like button and follow the channel so we can keep sharing these journeys together. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next one.